I find that when shooting photography, which is kind of a semi-hobby for me, but I do get paid to do it sometimes, there are some really important aspects to photography that I also find overlay my responsibilities in leadership, the training that I do in leadership, and the role that I serve as a leader. They're really fascinating, that light, angle, perspective, depth, focus, and color perspective make all the difference in the world. I think as leaders, we can learn a lot by studying more about photography. And I know that because I've been studying photography over the last year, and it enhances the way that I see relationships in leadership. I'll tell you more about that today. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and it's really fascinating to me when I change lenses from a short lens to a long lens, how I can zoom in further and see things that prior to changing lenses didn't even show up in the picture. I mean, they were there. It didn't make them not there, having the wrong lens on, but it did mean that I wasn't able to perceive them in their full color or in their full light or even in full focus because they were too far away for me to see. Now the same is true though when I have that long lens on, that I have to change what I'm looking for. I'll give you a good example. Yesterday we did a photo shoot in the stockyards of Fort Worth. At one moment I had been shooting a little trick that I learned from a reasonable distance from my target, from my model, with a 300 millimeter lens. What I learned is that by using the 300 millimeter lens, I can completely crop the frame behind her and get that field of depth that creates what's called the bokeh effect, where everything is still there and it's nice and bright, but it's out of focus, putting more focus on the subject. The 300 millimeter lens means I've got to back off 10 or 15 feet to get that shot, but I can still get a beautiful shot with all of the scenery around my target subject. What I realized though was I had not changed from that 300 millimeter lens back to the 135 when the client was playing with the dog, also part of the shoot for the day. And some beautiful moments happened where they were kissing on each other and snuggling each other and the tails were wagging and everybody was having a good time. And I was 3 feet away from the subject matter with the 300 millimeter lens on, which means nothing I did was enough to gain focus on the moment. I was simply too close for the lens that I had. I couldn't get the picture and I completely missed the moment. I'm going to tell you, in leadership that happens a lot as well. There are times that things get completely out of focus. You miss the moment, you miss the shot because you're too close to the subject. Let that settle in for a minute because you know it's true. It's happened to you. I also know that later that night I was trying to get that similar kind of effect just about the time of false light on the river walk with some nice stones behind us and a nice winding path and the water fading off into the distance. It would have been an absolutely gorgeous shot. We had just a little bit of light on the model and I was 25 feet away and zooming in to get a nice tight focus on her face, and I took that shot 30 or 40 times and never got it focused the way that I wanted to. Why? Because when you're that far away and you're zooming in, the aperture on the camera needs more light to get the picture in focus. Again, think about it from a leadership perspective. You know you've experienced this, that when you're further away from a project, further away from an assignment, further away from a problem, a contract, a bad employee, a bad situation, the further you are away, you may be able to zoom in, you may be able to gain a little bit of perspective. But unless the light is just right, you won't get it in focus. Meaning you'll see it. You'll know that it's there. You might even see the contrasts and the colors, but it'll be out of focus. Now here's the biggest problem. Sometimes You take that photo and you assume because you had the right lens, you had the right light, everything was good, that you got the right photo. I can tell you, in the thousands of weddings that I've DJ'd, watching the photographer take that portrait of the bride and groom and immediately, and I mean milliseconds, pull that camera down and go back to that lens, and here's what they do. They zoom in to the image, and what are they looking for? Are the eyes looking the right direction? Were they blinking at the time the camera snapped? Was it in focus? Now, a good photographer sets themselves up to get that picture anyway. Eyes right here, everybody smiling, eyes open, look at me. Make sure that you're looking right in the camera lens or wherever they're telling them to look. But the result of taking that picture isn't proven until you've gone to after the picture and zoomed in on the image. See, a challenge a lot of leaders have is that they forget that just because I have a good camera, I have a good lens, I have good light, and I'm shooting it from a reasonable distance, all the outcome is going to be exactly what I want. Many leaders presume that because I've got a good team and I've got good bylaws and I've got good standard operating procedures and I know what I expect my team to do, everything's going to be hunky-dory. It's all going to come out with the perfect result. And what they forget to do is that post-event or post-incident or post-product review, where you actually dig into a deep, abiding focus of the thing that you're trying to prove is valuable, the thing that you're trying to prove to be true. And the challenge for a lot of us is we don't do that immediate post-review. We wait till we get back and we go over the photos later. We go over the project months later, years later. An annual review might reveal that we've had the wrong person on that team, the wrong person in charge of that team, perhaps for months. But we haven't been reviewing it. We haven't been zooming in tight enough on the post photo, the post event, and looking at all the fine detail to say, okay, does everything come out right? Is the color showing the way that it should? I took a couple of images last night that we intentionally created a scene to look like an early morning sunrise. Sitting on the stones, the light coming in from just the right angle, just the right color of light, with just the right morning light coming in behind, using the false light to do that. But it wasn't until I went back and looked at those pictures that I realized that the color of the eyeshadow that the model chose to put on before we even knew where we were going suited that shot, suited the sundress she was wearing, suited the color scheme of the background that we chose to get that shot. See, I couldn't tell that with the naked eye, even shooting through the lens, even zooming in. But when I was able to see it on the digital screen and enhance even greater than what I took with the camera, then I was able to see things I couldn't see before. As leaders, we've got to be willing to do that post-incident, that post-scene review. We've got to zoom in really close. We've got to check the colors, if you will. We've got to make sure that everything matches. Not just that they kind of go together, but that they're complementary, that they fit within the color wheel, so to speak, that everything that we've done, all of the texture and all of the tone, actually fits well. As I'm saying this, I'm noticing that I've got a hot spot on my face over here where there's a light that's too bright and too white for good photography. I think it's okay for a podcast. I think it's okay for this video purpose, but if this were going on television, my color corrector would be looking at that going, man, we got to fix that light. You got a really chalky face on this side. It's not so in the other cameras. So what is it about that one? It's probably the color temperature of that light. But we can fix that. See, that's the kind of stuff that leaders have a hard time doing, is going back to the minor details and going, but what about that? Well, what about that little thing right there? Could we fix that? Now, I haven't been studying photography for long. In fact, the first few cameras that I bought were intentionally point and shoot. My Canon G10s, when I bought them almost 10 years ago, when I bought them, I said, I want a camera that I can hold up in the crowd and push the button and 9 times out of 10 get good event photography, because I don't care to learn about photography. But then I worked with a guy by the name of Josh Weiss, now Dr. Josh Weiss. Josh Weiss is a perfectionist when it comes to color, a perfectionist when it comes to video, a perfectionist when it comes to video production and photography. He's a phenomenal, very expensive, but very good photographer. He also happens to run a television network. He also happens to have a PhD in communication. And that PhD is part of his training in leadership development and communication skills. And when you merge all that together, we have a lot of similar fascinations and obsessions. My fascination and obsession with photography came from watching him and the way he did it. Matt Martin is another one of those. Phenomenal, incredible photographer who sees light and sees colors in a different way than most people do with the naked eye. I'm not there. I know I'm not there. I'm not even close. But here's what I am good at, and here's what I'll challenge you with. As a communicator, I see where leaders fail because they haven't taken what they've learned in other fields and overlaid it with their leadership. So I want to challenge you to do that. Whether it's photography for you, or it's video for you, or it's audio engineering for you, or maybe it's the way you take care of your lawn, or the way you put your boat in the water, or the way you fish. Look for every analogy that you can find that says, that is something that I do with great attention because I have a great passion for it. Overlay it with your leadership and see if it doesn't change the way you view your leadership. Remember that when you're a long way off and you're zoomed way in, tight focus is hard to achieve. When you've got just the right light and just the right color, you've got to be the right distance from your subject, or you're going to be out of focus from the very beginning. I hope these ideas have challenged the way you think about leadership, and you'll overlay some real basics about photography with the way you lead. Maintain the right distance. Keep enough light on the subject. Zoom in when you have to, change lenses when you have to, and if you have to, get away from the subject and let somebody else take the picture, because you can't take a picture that you're in. And you can't be in the picture you're taking, well, unless you're using a phone. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.